All right. So welcome everyone to day 2 of the workshop. And our first item on the agenda is a recap from day 1. And Linnea Fletcher will be presenting that. Thank you, Linnea.
Great. So when I was listening to everyone talk yesterday, I was just struck by the fact that the presenters, this is what I feel like concerning the presenters yesterday, Jim and Maggie, especially Iso, Jacob. If I've seen the future, it's because I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. And I hope you don't mind that I say that about the presenters. Okay. I hope you don't mind me saying that about the presenters, but every time I listen to this group of presenters, I'm struck by how much they know. And I just want to thank you for being willing to share your information. And I was so excited. I have to admit, I emailed Celeste and Pushpa this morning and said, you have to go listen to our recordings because it is the most amazing information about biomanufacturing. So again, thank all of you for your presentations. And I wish I was like a student in your class because I think it would be so fascinating to be in your class at this point, all of you, okay? So continue to share with the group, okay? And I also told my group, I know that my faculty at ACC couldn't attend because they had to teach, but I said, you have to listen to the recordings because they are absolutely amazing. Anyway, the one thing things that really struck me is I liked how Jim had this information up to share because I really feel, at least until this year, I didn't quite understand the difference between FDA controlled and non-FDA controlled, and Nimble and Biomade. And I personally feel that bioindustrial manufacturing will be quite the opportunity because it's not FDA regulated. And therefore, the idea of using different cell types and getting certifications and badging and all this type of information, career pathways could explode in this area and then eventually trickle down maybe to the FDA controlled area as they become more comfortable. So I really want to thank you, Jim, for presenting this. And this is something I'm going to share with all of my students and faculty and everybody to realize the opportunities that are going to be available in Biomade and in this area in general, just for workforce education and trends in workforce career development. So yeah, I did this a little bit differently. I hope you all understand. Maggie is much more concise and to the point, and I tried to do it the way Maggie did it, at the last one in December, and I just couldn't do it. So I'm sorry. Anyway, because I kept thinking of questions and points. So this is what stood out to me, okay? And this started with Jim's presentation. It's very obvious that the public and our students and our programs don't always necessarily realize the total material supply chain for biomanufacturing. Because plasmid, I hadn't even thought of the fact that, well, if you don't have plasmids, well, then you can't do this. So I really thank Jim for that. And I feel that this needs to be emphasized, how big the actual supply chain is for doing biomanufacturing and everything that's needed. So maybe we can get Todd to make the picture or something, or Jim, because until this happens, people don't realize how involved or how many supply chain routes there are just to do biomanufacturing. I like the emphasis on, hey, domesticated strains are totally different from the wild type strains. In fact, I would ask Jim And others, do they know that? Do they keep track of the gene drift or the genetic drift in these strains? And I figure they do, you know, because they are so important for biomanufacturing. So I would like to, genetically, I would like to know how different they are. And then the other thing is, once again, the emphasis on how many different cells types could be used for industrial biomanufacturing and how it's so limited because of FDA regulations in a regulated environment. And I was just thinking about when you do a startup company who's doing a product that's going to be FDA regulated, how much thought has to go into selecting that cell line, and how often, even though it may not be the optimal cell line, they tend to go back to the ones that the FDA is comfortable with. The other thing, I really liked the historical perspective that presenters did, because it provides a platform for students and programs so students understand why the processes and the materials that are being used today are in place. I think that's really important for people to understand, students especially. I'm really excited about the idea that Maggie presented, was that a low-tech antibody purification could replace GFP in intro to biotech. And I've already told my group that we should think about doing that, because then we could add in aseptic technique and cell culture into maybe our intro and our biotech methods course. So I thought that was a good idea. And then Purnima brought up to me later, what if we could combine that with virtual simulations, such that essentially high schools and other programs who can't afford the high tech could have the low tech hands-on, but then the high tech simulations. And then I wonder too, since it was brought up that he's been exploring how to get collaborations between different students across the world. Now, wouldn't that be interesting to do this for an Innovation Community College Challenge next year, is to do that kind of virtual simulation and get that kind of collaboration between two student groups across the globe on a problem, utilizing that simulation. So I think that's one thing that'd be really interesting. I also like Jim's comment that it was kind of right before we started again, that maybe at some point chemotherapy and radiation will be compared to bloodletting and leeches when gene therapy becomes more cost effective. And I was talking to Tom Tubon today, and actually he said this is already being developed. He actually has some information about that. And there is a closed box system that will be automated for this. So I thought, wow, that's fantastic. Of course, then there won't be as many jobs for our students, possibly. But I think personally that I should suggest to some of my students in my program in Texas to look for these jobs at this point. I know that one of our graduates is going to California and was offered 5 jobs in California, and she is in Texas and she's moving to California. So the idea that our students won't move is not true. I think in this climate, in this pandemic, in leveraging essentially the what's happening in biotech, our students can look at this as a career pathway, and they will be willing to move. The other thing is, I guess what I was really curious about, we do single cell and reusable vessel technology in our program, and our Texas biomanufacturing skill standards, which are going to be talked about today, they're based on what Sonia NBC Squared does. I assume because those skill standards are independent of vessel technology, that even if vessel technology changes, that the skill standards are still applicable and usable by programs who want to start biomanufacturing. And I figure this is something that Jim and Maggie have also investigated. I think the possibility for virtual simulations are opening up, and I was really impressed by the fact that Jacob was willing to work with us on this. I'm curious to know what industry does for virtual simulations for educating their employees. I don't know it. I figure Nimble knows quite a bit about this, and maybe some of you know quite a bit about this, and I'd be interested in learning more about it myself. And then I, as usual, always think about everything that's presented. What are the gaps in education for the community based on the presentations? And what are the possible ATE projects that could be done or written and then hosted by other community colleges based on what was presented yesterday? And the same is true, what could be done in Biomade? What could be done in Nimble? And I'm kind of thinking that maybe the center needs to help promote collaborations among community colleges to essentially address some of these gaps that we can think of as a result of the presentations yesterday. So it's not necessarily a recap of what everyone said yesterday, but it is a recap in my mind of what is considered important or possibly important and what we could do for the future. So I would actually like to open up the floor for discussion based on this. So did I scare all you guys away or something?
This group doesn't scare easily. Can I jump in? Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that in a way, the non-pharmaceutical biotechnology is going to be more democratic than pharmaceutical biotechnology. That is, the barrier to entry is a lot less. So a student could open up a company with a good idea in their garage where the regulations wouldn't allow you to do that for pharmaceutical biotech. I think it's going to be more rural, where pharmaceutical biotech kind of hugs the coast or the area where there's a lot of money, where the financial centers are. I think there's a lot of potential for non-pharmaceutical to reach the rural areas of the United States that currently really don't have biotech per se, although they may have something close to biotech in terms of production of alcohol for fuels or production for alcohol for consumption. So I think there's a big opportunity here.
I'd agree with you, Jim. But also I would say, actually, I thought you put it really well in your talk yesterday, where you basically said, pharmaceutical companies have a lot of this regulation. A lot of what they do is due to the regulation, and that these other companies, again, don't have to do the regulation, but it's a good idea. And I think we see something with like the Food Safety Modernization Act. Again, the regulation is actually moving into the food space, moving into these other places. And if you're a company, you need to make sure that your product is actually good and does what you say it does. And so I think the market's going to come back and really push back on that. And I think this, the regulation and using GMPs and everything else are all just kind of good business ideas to actually do. So I think we're going to see more and more, but I don't think it's going to be open up totally. But I think we're going to see, kind of see them meet somewhere in the middle. We have too much regulation in pharma, and we maybe don't have enough consistency of regulation in industrial manufacturing.
One of the things I think is really exciting about all this new development and a really great opportunity for us as faculty to reach across our campus is to talk with our business folks. So for instance, I have really great business program at Laney College in Oakland, and I've been talking with my colleague there about just creating a certificate in like biotech entrepreneurship, which is not involving adding or developing any new curriculum, but is really having a conversation about what do you see as really important as the business person for the students to know? What do I contribute from the biotech I actually have included the regulatory affairs for people because I think it's important for them to know that, besides the fact it boosts that enrollment in that class. And so I think this is a really exciting opportunity to also reach out to people who maybe have never thought about biotech. If I'm reaching into the business classes going, look here, there's a whole world out here that you might want to get excited about. And so that's been kind of a fun development that started just with the conversations about Biomade and having some of those, neurons fire about how do we move into the next area.
Great, perfect. Who else? I want to hear from everybody.
I think that we're neglecting to mention the ag biotech sector.
Yep.
Yeah, Nick knows this is a personal passion of mine. I live in Kansas City. We have over 300 animal health biotech companies in the greater Kansas City area. That makes us the largest concentration in the world. And it's something that doesn't get brought up enough. Regulation for ag biotech is USDA regulation, which is a separate set of regulations, not so much lax as different. But the ag biotech sector is predicted to triple in size by 2030. And that's a pretty extraordinary difference. And like Nick said, that's going to enter into the food sciences as well as the pet health, as well as the agricultural animal health sectors that are all going to be growing.
Great. Thank you. So, hey, we need an additional conversation on this. So don't forget, we need to schedule more conversations around the idea of the center promoting collaborations. And I will gladly do that. So if you didn't get to say anything right now, please ping me and we will set that up. Okay.